Alrighty, hi friends. So, we've been talking a lot in class about the weather. We've been talking about the water cycle and the precipitation that comes down and the water vapor that evaporates back up. We talk about the condensation making the clouds. This is cloudy with a chance of meatballs. Boys and girls, are meatballs ever something that's going to fall from the clouds? No. It's always going to be water. But not unlike this story, No More Water in the Tub, where the whole thing was a story that was told from one brother to the other. This story was told by the grandpa. So, do you have your listening ears? Nice quiet mouth. Hands in your lap, because it's a long one. You're going to want to be ready. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs by Judi, Barrett. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could eat. And Grandpa was doing the flipping. There he goes, flipping those pancakes. Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed toward the kitchen ceiling, and it landed right on Henry. Oh no. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that had landed on Henry. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall tale bedtime story he'd ever told. Here comes the story part. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, there lay the tiny town of Chewandswallow. In most ways, it was very much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses, and trees, and gardens around them, a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some assorted cats and dogs. But there were no food stores in the town of Chewandswallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chewandswallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day, at breakfast, at lunch, and at dinner. Everything that everyone ate in the town of Chewandswallow came from the sky. Whatever the weather served, that was what they ate. But it never rained rain, it never snowed snow, and it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice. It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas, and sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. Look at those storm clouds of hamburgers. I know some children in our class who like the hamburgers. So, do you think you would like to live in Chewandswallow, where the food would fall from the sky? I'm not sure yet. I think I need to hear more about the town of Chewandswallow. So here's what would happen. The people would watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, spoons, forks, knives, and napkins with them. That way they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, people took them home and put them in the refrigerators in case they got hungry in between meals. So see how this is working? This taxi driver is sticking the plate out the window to catch the food. And this one is wearing a raincoat and has an umbrella, but instead of using the umbrella to keep the precipitation off, he's catching it in the umbrella so they can eat it. And look at this lady right here. She's making sure those 2 chicken legs don't get away from her. She wants those on her plate. The menu varied. What does that mean? The menu varied. The menu varied. Well, let's keep reading and see if we can find out what varied means. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time it rained milk afterwards. Was that just one thing? No, we saw, here we go, let's do this. We saw orange juice, sunny-side-up eggs, toast, butter, jelly, and milk. So that's not just one thing on the menu, that's a varied menu. That's a few different things. That's maybe not many different things, just a couple of various things. It's a varied menu. For lunch one day, frankfurters, already in their rolls, blew in from the southwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby. Then the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. This book was written a long time ago. That's why they're talking about having soda. But take a look here. It says these are frankfurters. Do you know another name for that food? Yeah, in my house we call them hot dogs. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times, with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by a gradual clearing with a wonderful jello setting in the west. That's a beautiful dinner. The sanitation department of Chewandswallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns. The workers cleaned things up after every meal, and that's how they fed the dogs and the cats. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish and the turtles and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth, so the soil would be richer for people's gardens. Clever idea. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. Look at this newspaper. And yes, boys and girls, we did talk about what a newspaper is, and I showed you. We use them when we do our painting. It says here, spaghetti ties up the town. And look at the picture. Look at how deep that spaghetti is. Oh no. And then one day, there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. Look at how those people have a little clothespin on their noses. Do you think gorgonzola cheese smells good or smells stinky? Yeah, gorgonzola cheese is pretty stinky. The next day there was only broccoli. Well, I like broccoli, but it says here the broccoli was soggy and overcooked. And the next day, there were Brussels sprouts with peanut butter and mayonnaise. Oh no, that'll ruin a birthday party, won't it? And another day, there was pea soup fog. Nobody could see where they were going, and they could barely find the rest of the meal that got stuck in the fog. Yep, pea soup is usually pretty thick. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. and the people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently, and awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls, some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye bread and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they had ever seen bread and rolls before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. The roofs on the houses were damaged, and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. There they are. To help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards, and the birds picked at it a bit, but it just stayed there and got stale. Oh, that's a terrible waste. That's not okay. There was a storm of pancakes one morning and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. You remember what a flood is? That nearly flooded the town, not with water, but with syrup. Yuck! A huge pancake covered the whole school, and no one could get it off because of its weight. It was so heavy. They had to close the school because of a giant pancake on it. You see that? Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick, and the day ended with a stomachache. And then, this is my favorite page, and then there was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp from the tomatoes everywhere. The sanitation department gave up. The job was too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been badly damaged by giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up, and there was no more school for the children. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chewandswallow. It was a matter of survival. Okay, we do need to remember now, who's telling this story? Do you remember where this story came from? Remember, there's Grandpa and the children. It's a bedtime story, right? So were there really any tomato tornadoes? Were there really any meatballs, giant meatballs falling from the sky? Look at the size of those donuts. There's no donuts falling from the sky. But in the story that Grandpa told, the decision was made to abandon the town of Chewandswallow because it was a matter of survival. But how are they going to leave Chewandswallow? How are they going to escape? Take a look at this. It says here, the people glued together the giant pieces of stale bread, sandwich style, and they used peanut butter for the glue. They took the absolute necessities with them, and they set sail for their rafts for a new land. See, they made a giant sandwich out of the food. They made a big boat out of their sandwich, and away they went. Well, after being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town. That means it's near the water, which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary houses for themselves out of it. Look, they took the stale bread from their boats and they made it into houses. Wow. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make, they had to get used to buying food at a supermarket. They found it odd that the food was kept on shelves and packaged in boxes and cans and bottles, that the meat that had to be cooked was kept in large refrigerators. In this small coastal town, nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs, and nobody ever got hit by a flying hamburger again. And nobody dared to go back to Chewandswallow to find out what had happened. They were afraid. Henry and I, we were awake all the way until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his goodnight kiss. The next morning we woke up to see snow falling outside our window. Snow is a pretty normal thing to have falling from the sky, right? Rain and snow are the kinds of precipitation we're used to. Well, we ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sliding down the snowy hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top, and we could almost smell mashed potatoes. And look at what this book does. It even gives us the end. All right, that's a very long story. Thank you for listening.